G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot. Sunday 6th of March 2016, Outsiders Dag End followed by First Dog on the Moon.
What it is that we want to say.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Here we have people being engaged in politics, and it's kind of disturbing.
Well, I think actually one of the more interesting trends, in a bright side, silver lining kind of moment that we might see out of the Trump popularity is actually the revitalization of some independent movements, political movements in the United States. So Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, is, considering, hinting at, etc., an independent run in the event that Trump gets up, and actually breaking the ossification around these sort of two major parties and revitalizing some alternatives might actually not be the worst possible outcome of a Trump campaign.
It certainly simply has the capacity, though, to drive a huge wedge in the Republican Party. I mean, the Republican Party establishment is appalled at what's going on.
Yes.
There is talk about a brokered convention where the numbers might lead to the parachuting in of someone like Mitt Romney as an establishment candidate, which would tear the party apart from its base, which would do a lot to destroy that party.
It would do that. The nice thing about the American system is it is actually very democratic, where the party members get to vote as to who they want to represent them. And unfortunately, it does throw up a Trump from time to time, but last time it threw up Romney too. I mean, he wasn't particularly a good candidate, wasn't interested too much. But there does seem to be a dearth of talent of individuals who do actually want to run to become president in the United States on the Republican side. If we have a look at McCain before him, they put up Dole. People who certainly shouldn't have been thinking about being the president. So it is profoundly democratic, and that's a good thing. I think a brokered convention would be very controversial.
Yes.
I would be the 1930s or even before the last time something like that has ever happened in the United States. So it would be controversial. It would be anti-democratic. I suspect Mr. Trump would sue. I mean, what else do you do? We would have another election sorted out in the High Court. No.
Speaking of intensely democratic, Eurovision is almost upon us. He said, changing the subject somewhat. Katrina, you're impressed with the Australian offering?
I think she's a great choice. Dami Im, she won the X Factor, and that's her kind of main claim to fame, but she's an incredibly accomplished Korean-Australian musician, double degrees in music from Queensland and Griffith University. She is
incredibly
a star.
Talented. Except that it's going to be that sort of Euro pop thing, isn't it? See, I have an alternative view of who should represent us.
I'm the sort of bloke that'd like to think that if I could go back in time, Banjo and Henry and even Ned Kelly would all be good mates of mine.
Yes, you see, I reckon if we sent Kevin Bloody Wilson to Eurovision, that would set the world on its ear. Who's with me?
It'd shake things up.
You actually want to win this, don't you?
Yeah, I'm taking it all together the wrong way around, am I not?
That's totally the wrong attitude there.
I'm being too serious. Thank you all. We've covered the gamut today, I think. Yes, we have some unnecessary conversations, but some difficult ones. Vishal Kishore is Principal Fellow at the Melbourne School of Government at the University of Melbourne. Katrina Sedgwick is the Director, CEO of the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. And Sinclair Davidson hails from the School of Economics at RMIT. It's 5 to 10.
Ahoy there, patriots, and welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm the Walkley Award-winning editorial cartoonist for The Guardian Australia, First Dog on the Moon. Today's guide comes to you live from the bowels of a Collins-class submarine, the HMAS Mirabella, and we're just off the coast of it's a secret location, I can't tell you, but we're 5 nautical miles southwest of Queanbeyan in a dam. Trust me when I tell you the stealth capacity of these undersea craft is considerable. Submarines, the spaceships of the sea. Such an important part of Australia's defence infrastructure that the federal government is planning to build quite a lot more of them. How many specifically? Well, let me just check this copy of the most recent defence white paper I got from Tony Abbott's special friend, Mr. Greg Sheridan of the Australian newspaper. It's a highly top-secret document, and Greg won't say where he got it. which is appropriate, of course. However, it's also an enormous breach of national security, so the Prime Minister has called in the Australian Federal Police. How exciting. It's just like the hunt for Red October, except not even slightly interesting, and with even worse accents. It's time to find out who's leaking against our Prime Minister, and will someone tell him so he can change his trousers? Anyway, if only the government had enacted a massive program of data retention just for this purpose. Oh, the chief suspect was, of course, Prime Minister Tony Abbott, until he took time out from his busy backbencher schedule to say he didn't do it. Here is Prime Minister Tony Abbott at his press conference. I didn't do it! And so, of course, that was the end of that. Tony's never lied before, so we have no reason to doubt him now. And don't forget that he also said he wouldn't snipe, undermine, or be a wrecker. Of course, Tony didn't say anything about not subverting, sabotaging, disrupting, hindering, impeding, whittling away, obstructing, throwing any spanners in the works, or just generally getting in everyone's way and being a pain in the arse, but we know what he meant. So when it comes to the submarines, Tony is right to be flabbergasted. The fact that the government's decided to put back the construction of these submarines until when they said they would actually build them is disgraceful. And my question is, why on earth does it take 10 years to build a submarine? I mean, sure, they're really, really big and they can't have any holes in them, but other than that, you put an engine at one end, a door on the top and some steering flippers, one of those popping up periscope thingies, and away you go. Anyway, if you think you can explain why it takes so long to build a submarine, please write your answer on a postcard and post it to Mr. I don't actually care what the answer is, P.O. Box 9994 in your capital city, and then pop it in the nearest backbencher. Interestingly, these subs might come in handy in the next war Australia's dragged into, the one between Malcolm Turnbull and the forces of darkness, or, as they're more commonly known, Tony Abbott and the far right of the Liberal Party. Anyway, this has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living, coming to you live from inside the Sophie Mirabella. Oh, there's someone at the door. I'll get it. You there! What are you doing?
And we never heard from him again. That's it for Sunday Extra for this week, if you missed anything.
Well, so there you go. Peta Credlan has apparently now become analogous to Junie Morosi. Junie Morosi was the then infamous personal private secretary to a bloke called Jim Cairns, and Jim Cairns was pretty much like Gough Whitlam's right-hand man back in the days of the kitchen cabinet, when three people sort of got together and decided how things were going to change after the Labor Party won the It's Time election. And quite an attractive style of a personal private secretary was Junie Morosi, to the point where she became known as the screw that held cabinet together. So apparently, not only have Liberal parliamentarians put it on record to journalists who've made a book of it, that they fronted Tony Abbott and said, are you having an affair with this Credlan woman who is dragging the party down into public disrepute in the polls because of the authoritarian way that the Prime Minister's office is telling people what has to happen and not consulting anybody and pulling captain's picks out of somebody's arsehole. You know, like this Peta Credlan is causing all manner of grief within the party and in the perceptions of the electorate. You've got to get rid of her, and you won't get rid of her. And now, you know, is it true that you're having an affair with Peta Credlan, Tony? And Tony Abbott yesterday said that he wasn't interested in raking up old ashes, and he's always been denying the idea that he had any kind of a romantic entanglement with his personal private secretary, Peta Credlan. And she's always denied it, and it's been considered politically incorrect to mention it on today's Outsiders. You know, everybody said, oh, isn't it terrible that anybody would bring up the idea that there was a sexual relationship going on between Tony Abbott and Peta Credlan, and that's why it didn't matter what stupid idea she came up with, he was prepared to defend it. As if there's never been a species of male human who let the little head rule their big head when it come to the the utterances of a woman that they were infatuated by. As if that's never happened before in human history, you see. Therefore, it's politically incorrect to think that it might have happened here and now. One of the more interesting things I did hear on Friday, when the news of this book's imminent release was first broached, was that a fella called Laurie Oakes, who's kind of like the senior grandfather of the Australian Parliamentary Press Corps, been there for 40 years, he said that he was at a function where Tony Abbott and Peta Credlan were both eating a meal along with a bunch of journalists and other people, and he was unable to not take note of the fact that Peta Credlan was feeding morsels off her plate to Tony Abbott with her fork. She was feeding him in public, which was an interesting piece of body language. And then later on, after the meal and a few glasses of the sparkling bubbliness, Peta Credlan, the personal private secretary to Tony Abbott, the then Prime Minister, laid her head upon her boss's shoulder and remarked that she was tired and it was time to go to bed. It must be her bedtime. She was tired. Perhaps the bed is an inference rather than a piece of reportage. But yeah, it would explain a lot in terms of Tony Abbott's intransigence. If he was cunt-struck by Peta Credlan, a word the feminist politically correct lobby doesn't like to think about, but it's a phenomenon that happens in real life, you know. Some men are indeed able to be led around by their foreskin, so to speak. And if Tony Abbott spends all his working days at the office, he's not going to be breathing his wife's pheromones, is he? He's going to be breathing Peta Credlan and her pheromones. And so the evolutionary biologists tell us, all men are attracted by the smell of any ovulating woman. If he spends all his time with Peta Credlan, he's going to be smelling her as she cycles, much more than he's going to smell his missus because she's at home, you know, being the perfect Liberal Party kitchen bitch, raising the little daughters to get handout scholarships that nobody else knew were available or applied for, that just sort of descend on her out of the blue so that she doesn't have any problems paying for her tertiary education in the marvellous user-pays system that her father's side of politics has put together since he got his free education, before he got his Rhodes Scholarship to go and learn how to punch people in the nose at Oxford University while doing a law degree. And coming out of a Rhodes Scholarship with a law degree, and he doesn't seem to have any idea of how Magna Carta rights are expressed in a free democratic society. He was a disaster when he was a Prime Minister. The Liberal Party must be hating the fact that he's wandering around with his mouth open all the time. And he is. He's wandering around with his mouth open all the time, just big noting himself. I don't think we need to build 12 new submarines because I don't think it's going to make a ball hair of difference. Australia's never really been able to protect its maritime borders. What we tend to do is get used to the idea that whoever shows up will have to be nice to them. In 1942, the Japanese never wanted to come here, so the fact that they didn't come here made us think that we had stopped them. We didn't stop them, they just didn't want to show up. But since then, we have been locked into the ANZUS Treaty, which means that anywhere America chooses to lose a war, we have to go and help them lose the war. And as we heard on background briefing, the F-35s that we're going to pay about 200 million Australian dollars each for, by the time we get them, they're going to turn out to be 72 turkeys that won't fly, or if they will fly, they won't do anything else they're supposed to do properly. They'll be easy to spot on the radar. Every 10 minutes they've got to open their weapons bay to cool themselves down while they shock cool the electronics and bust everything up. So, God knows what sort of submarines we'll get. Probably ones with fly screen doors on them for summertime, and they'll sink every time you try to put them underwater. We're approaching the upload limit. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.